All right, good evening, everyone. So, welcome to the Unreal Engine community. And this is the Unreal Meetups Talk series.
This event is sponsored by Artmaker Studios, your world from a different perspective, with collaboration with the La Salle University College of Computer Studies and UPLB Computer Science Society.
And this is your host, Michael Rivero.
And I am your co-host, Jelly Ann Carillo.
So, let's talk about the Unreal community first. Unreal community is a global network ng mga developers, designers, artists who are currently using the Unreal Engine. And as we all know, very popular siya sa gaming industry. But nowadays, we can see a lot of digital products, creative outputs being utilized in different outputs. So it could be product design, simulations, visual effects, and other forms of interactive content.
We now have an official Unreal community in the Philippines based in Quezon City with chapters in Cebu. Our mission is to foster a strong, inclusive space for collaboration, innovation, and learning among Unreal Engine users of all levels.
Okay, so this is called the Unreal Meetups Talk series. This is actually open to everyone, professionals, students, independent developers, startups. As long as you have any cool projects using Unreal, it could be games, animations, digital products, simulations, visualization, or anything out of the box. We are open to talk about your projects and your experience also.
Our speaker for today po is Jeremiah Gallo. He is a 3D artist and lecturer.
Okay, just to break down tong event natin, take note the presentation will take around 60 minutes and it's going to be live streaming via YouTube. We're going to also post that in our other social media channels. And then after that, there's going to be a live demo for 30 minutes. And then there's going to be a Q&A. Take note, you can actually post your questions in advance. We're going to sending questionnaire forms sa ating mga social media channels, and you can input your questionnaires or questions in there, and then we're gonna relay it to sa ating speakers. Then after the Q&A, there's gonna be networking, but at that point we're not gonna be live anymore, but we're gonna be continue the discussion in a private channel via Zoom. So it's gonna be a networking opportunity for you. So if you're interested to talk to our speakers or to other members of our groups, please do join us via Zoom channel. And yung Zoom natin, we will also be posting that on our social media channels. So unfortunately, we are limited to 100 packs. So if you're really interested to join the networking, you can log into the Zoom. So we're gonna allot 30 minutes for networking. So looking forward to meet you guys there. And I'm gonna pass the mic now to Jeremiah. So Jeremiah, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
All right.
Hello.
I'm gonna... Okay, there you go.
Okay, sige, I'll share my screen na. All right, so is it good na pa? All right, so I'll begin. Hello everybody. My name is Jeremiah Gallo, and today I'm going to be talking about Unreal Engine game workflow, specifically game ready workflow for Unreal Engine 5. And I'm going to do a quick introduction. My name is Jeremiah Gallo, or you can call me JJ for short. I am a 3D artist since 2022, but I have been making art professionally since 2017. And I noticed that there are some students of mine joining the chat, so hello. And yeah, so I'll just do a quick introduction of myself, and then we will move on to the actual project. So yeah, so this is my name, and I am a 3D artist I was a 3D artist for AR, VR, and video games since 2021. To those people who are curious, 2017 to 2020 was my illustration days. So I was a concept artist before, which means that everything that I create has everything to do with 2D aesthetics. So 3D was sort of new during this time, but I was part of the Narrasoft team for quite a bit. And hi to the Narrasoft people, former Narrasoft. I was there since 2021, where I created assets for 3D and specifically with PBR materials, which means physically based rendered materials. We're going to be discussing that later, but majority of our training depends on PBR, which is physically based rendering, and DCC, which is digital content creation, related to Unreal Engine 5, Maya Substance Painter, Blender, Rhizome UV, ZBrush, and Marmoset Toolbag. These are a lot to take in, but generally these are just tools that have specific uses. So if you guys are curious, do check them out. And then recently, I started teaching at Benilde. So hello to my current students, if you're watching, where I'm studying 3D production. So this is kind of broad because I'm currently teaching mainly 3D animation, but we're trying to expand it. So maybe in the future, there will be news. But yeah, so that's the general breakdown. And I'm doing the same thing as well. If you guys are curious where I'm usually hanging out, I'm usually at the 11th floor at the LSCSB Design and Arts campus, and we try to incorporate these a lot. So yeah, that's who I am. So what are my prominent digital projects? So my projects in Narrasoft are related to virtual reality. So that includes your experience immersion inside the video game using a headset. So if you guys are curious, you can find it. I think PlayStation has one. AR relates to the phone. So if you guys want to, if you're curious about that, it's Pokemon Go, stuff like that. And then we focused primarily on virtual try-on assets. So that relates to clothing that is being virtually shown through the phone screen. So that's mainly what we do. And then for a while, we also did some rigging and animation with mocap. So this one is NDA. I'm sorry, I can't really share so much because of NDA, but everything is related to motion capture. And if you guys are curious, Mixamo is kind of related to that, which is a Adobe platform for motion capture. And then we did some 3D sculpting for material authoring. So material authoring just simply means materials that you can find for video games. So yeah. All right, next. Then I moved on from Narsoft. I kind of wanted to expand my horizons. This is where I became serious about 3D art in general, because in Narsoft, they didn't really do much environments. We did a lot of props. So CGMA kind of was that opportunity for me, given an excuse to really focus on environment art. So that's what I did. If you guys are curious about CGMA, it's CG Masters Academy. And I would like to give a shout out to Hugh Trombley, one of the people who did the Last of Us Part 2. He's been a great mentor there. So if you guys are curious about like really diving deep, I would highly recommend CGMA. They offer really good certificate courses. And what I did there mostly was focus on modular asset creation for Unreal Engine 5, and then material authoring for environments, and then hard surface modeling for props. So as you can see, these are one of my recent projects. And then I have a breakdown of this in ArtStation if you guys are curious. But of course, I'm going to be breaking it down here as well. Okay. Next, what's my current role? My current role is I'm a college instructor. I just started like since October. So I'm pretty new to it, but I did have some experience with what's that? Senior high. So I have some senior high students who recently graduated Benil. So congratulations to them. Some of them came from Arki, from what I remember. Yeah. And then also right now in as my freelance role, I'm a 3D environment artist. Sadly, I can't talk about the games I worked on because again, NDA, but just take my word for it. Okay. So now I'm going to be talking about modular design. If people are curious about what modular design is, it's actually everyone has experience with modularity already. General, the gist behind it is that modularity started during the production of basic materials that were used for constant reproduction. So that includes weapons during World War, and then houses started becoming modular, and then now that became like a standard rule for everything, which means that from guns and weapons to vehicles, it went all the way to skyscrapers. So everything that you have right now, that we have, including the houses that we stay in, the furniture that we have, they're all modular. So what's the best way to describe that? I was doing my research, and the best three companies that I found that were very good at describing modularity are Legos, IKEA, and Toyota. So why Legos? I actually grew up with Legos. That's one of the first things that my mom and my dad bought me because we couldn't really, we weren't really video game freaks back then. We didn't have video games back then. So yeah, there was a world without internet. So we did a lot of building and constructing. So my brother used to create stuff like spaceships and stuff, and I would just create buildings. So I think that's where my whole world began to spread towards environment art. And then IKEA, interesting enough, my brother actually worked there, which is awesome. So we actually did some IKEA like furniture. We actually broke it down and then like reassembled them together, which is awesome. And then of course I have my Wigo Toyota. My experience with it is I would go to the casa or the place where they're going to fix the car, and they would show you the parts and pieces. So you can actually find modularity everywhere you go. And now translating that to video games is that modularity just means the repetition of 3D models within the space. And the only way that you'll break those repetitions are by having variations of those repetitions. It's hard to take in, but you'll understand in a few slides later. But the idea is you should be able to have a few assets that you're going to create just so that you can expand it and create the variation of that. Like you can have with the same door for a whole 30-floor building, stuff like that. That's the idea. And then you can also add modularity, of course, in story. So that includes damaged and used props, which are like, it's very common now in video games. We can do that with symbols and icons and scales and floor plan. So you can visualize all the story based on how things are used, where it's being used, the cultural construct, the story behind it, and how those materials and stories can actually translate to multiple video game assets. I'm going to be breaking this down. It's a little abstract, but bear with me. So yeah. But before we begin, I'm going to share a bit of my backstory. I was actually an AB animation graduate in 2013. So to my students, I was in the same batch as Vaughn, Danny, Meryl, those guys. So if they've been your professors, yeah, they were my batchmates, and I graduated 2017. I was actually supposed to graduate 2016. I just got delayed by one term. You know how it is, thesis and stuff like that. But I majored into the animation, and we did some commissions on the side, because you gotta have experience, just starting. So that's where the OGT comes in, and then 2017 to 2022, I kind of went towards concept creation for children's books. So it wasn't really that fancy. I actually wanted to do comic books before, but my skill sets were mainly on children's books and illustrations. So that's where it all started. And then the pandemic happened. I'm sure you guys understand how hard that was. So I started moving towards the 3D, just to do something very different. That's what got me to Narrasoft, and then studied CGMA, where we did environment art and AR VR stuff that I showed a while ago. And now I am here. teaching at Binil. Animo. All right. So what are my influence back then? I'm you can tell my age based on the first game. I'm actually a huge Mega Man fan back then. So my influence kind of slowly gravitated towards like storytelling stuff. Because when I was a kid, finally started playing video games. When I started playing Mega Man ZX series, I started realizing that there are games that have story. So I was like, wow, games can have story. And then you move on to other games. Got Super Mario next, then became my favorite platformer growing up because it was really really fun to just jump around and stuff like that. You're a kid, you're just trying to explore stuff. And then Pokemon became like that gateway to creating your own stuff, because like you can create your own Pokemon and like imagine yourself um owning one, and then what their evolutions are, creating, having names in it. And then it really hit me when I got my first PlayStation 3. Thanks, Mama. She bought me one, where I experienced Uncharted 1 to 3 simultaneously. Because, like, I didn't know that you can be this immersed in a video game. And then what got me to really want to pursue it as a career was StarCraft 2, the main campaign. So I didn't know that you can get paid, you can get paid to be an artist. So some BlizzCon development YouTube website, I mean YouTube video showed an interview of artists who got paid to create this stuff. So I was like, okay, I can do this. I didn't know. And then when I got into the industry as a 3D artist, then I played Red Dead Redemption 2. And I was like, okay, now I want to be an environment artist because this is amazing. This is insane. So that's really where my influence came in. Took a while. But not all beginnings are great. So my initial Unreal work was really just understanding 3D sculpting and modeling. Didn't really understand much. So I was just trying to create textures for the company, understanding PBR rendering and all that. And then it was my first time producing 3D art for video games. That was pretty fun. You just do props and stuff like that. But when I really wanted to take it seriously, CGMA really challenged that. That's where I started creating modular stuff, materials, and then hard surface modeling techniques that were like magic, because they didn't know that modifiers in Blender or 3ds Max could be so useful in the pipeline. So here's what I'm doing now. This is what I did recently. I have a breakdown of every single one of these. If you guys are so curious about it, just go to my art station. I did break down the materials and stuff. So if you guys are curious about how I did the blueprints, and blueprints are just the code that are visual, I'll dive into that later in the demo. But these are the works that I have now. If you guys find the old artworks, I apologize. This is the only time I really got good at art, so bear with me. And yeah, so now we're ready to talk about the game ready assets for Unreal Engine 5. So back to Lego, IKEA, and Toyota. Here are the common traits that I found that were so useful to the modularity as an everyday concept. So as you can see here in the photos on the side, these are all common traits when you're talking about modularity design. The idea is that pieces should be able to work alone and together. So each of these pieces are self-supporting. So if one is damaged, you can always replace it. That's the idea behind that. Each piece performs a specific task. So you have the long and then the short, then the tall, and then they have their own specific reasons for their specifications, right? So that's the idea. And they have their own specific tasks for it. There are multiple combinations that you can create. So, kind of like when you're a kid, you just have 5 pieces and you can create either a house or a mountain. And then it's up to your imagination. But that's the idea behind the multiple combination. Then you can have consistency design per category. And this just simply means that each piece, right, you can replicate them over and over again. When they break, you can make another one because they can be easily replaceable. They're also very reusable. So I can get some stuff from the previous assets and then put it to the new ones or alongside the new ones. It's also scalable. And because Legos are just small pieces, you can have like bigger modules that you can expand into a whole city. And that's how I started with my own personal projects. They're also very flexible and adaptable in space. So because everything is measured in meters, centimeters, if you live in the US, inches or feet, but that's the consistency behind it. And then they're easy to maintain per piece, like I said a while ago, and each piece has its own unique design. All right. So that's the common trait between modular pieces. So what about video games, right? So for environment, the common traits for the things that I've created here, and if you guys want to start doing it now, um, there are six common traits in environment art that you have to consider as part of the initial block out that you're going to be creating. Okay, so the common traits are the ceilings. Don't forget to include the purposes and the usefulness of the ceilings, because each ceiling has their own reason for being there. Roofs, so it could either be tiled or solid roofs, or it could be like one of those haystack roofs. So they're also very it can all change, but every single house has a roof and every single house has a ceiling as well. The walls can also vary, but this is a very, very common trait. And I think all the 3D artists that I know create environments start with walls. So it could either be curved, straight, damaged, and pillars are included as walls, technically. Floors could be organic or man-made. And then don't forget nature. This is a common occurrence, obviously. So that includes leaves, stone, rock, and the mountains and all that. And don't forget the props, because this is like the foundation of how scaling works when you're walking through a scene. So keep that in mind. So these are all the common traits that you will find in any environment, whether it's a cathedral or a small, tiny house, right? So those are the common traits. So what about what do you have to keep in mind? You have to keep in mind that everything you create when it comes to environment art, just keep it simple, right? You do not want to overproduce each asset that you have, right? So you have each of these pieces are related to the each environment art that I showed a while ago. So this one, Roman art architecture, is related to this. And then this one is for the sci-fi environment interior. And this one is the feudal Japan. And this one is the Hellions Way, the Viking stuff. Why keep it simple? It's because you just want to make sure that you're reusing the same stuff without overdoing the asset. Because most of the time when artists begin, right, we want to be ambitious. We want to create something huge immediately. But in environment art, you don't really want to do that. You want to make sure that you are being purposeful in your repetitions, right? So in each project that I have experienced, at least, you kind of need around 15 to 30 pieces total. So that's generally how much the pieces are. That sometimes includes furniture, but we don't really include furniture much, because what's important is the overall shape of the place. So we will think about that later. But that's the idea for the environment, so that you can spread out as much real estate as you can for maximum impact, or the story, right? And then it's uh also almost always have commonly occurring materials that share between projects. So it might not be obvious, but the same wood material is also the same wood material that you can find here in feudal Japan and here in my Viking, because wood is a common occurrence, right? Like, what kind of ancient house doesn't have wood? So you want to make sure that you have something that you can have in your library. You have it saved in a different folder, and then you can keep reusing it over and over again. That's the basic goal. At least that's the basic goal behind it. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to be teaching, this is very complicated, but I'm going to try to break it down a little bit later, especially in the demo. The idea of material shaders, this is really, really essential when it comes to Unreal Engine, because everything that we create when it comes to like variation will have everything to do with the visual fidelity of the textures that you have. And this just simply means that you kind of have to be scientific about how walls are created. So, if you're curious, walls are generally created with beams, right? So metal beams have a material for the metal beams, and then on top of that, you have the block of wood. I know, block of gravel, I think, or bricks, right? And then plaster, which is like the basic a gray, like a wall for straightening up, and then you have the paint. So that's usually how walls are made here, at least in our country. That's how walls are made. So you have to consider that, because when you are doing these materials called vertex painting or RGB masking, they sound complicated, but it just means that you are trying to break down each material into their basic forms based on hierarchy. So you always have to begin with the basic like what I said a while ago. The beams first, and then the bricks, and then the plaster, and then the painting. And these are just ways that we will like create the assets together, is by breaking it down using these things called masks. So now you can see it here, based on what I was telling you a while ago, is that the scratches actually have a different material, which are inside this color green mask right here. This one right here. So color green. And then red is for the wood that have been dilapidated because of rain, sweat, and what do you call that? Like moss included, right? And then you have the different types of metal as well. So I have two types of metal here: the clean metal, the one that is with painting and stuff, and then you have the damaged metal, which is inside this red mask right here. So the idea that the idea now is you kind of want to have a material per mask, so that you can have a variation of the asset from another version of the asset. So it sounds really complicated, but I'll show a breakdown of that. Don't worry. And then you have the another version of this shader, which is the vertex painting. This is where you manually paint the vertices, so that you can create variations between two materials. All right. Don't worry. I have like an Unreal file just dedicated to this. So if you guys are curious later, I will show it in the demo. Okay. All right. So now we're gonna move on to the fun stuff, which is storytelling. I was a concept artist before, so I really wanted to create this scene right here, with story in mind. So I had a lore. I had a complete lore about it. Like, you have these 12 tribes inside. So if you guys see the scene, you have different hierarchical height of these tribes, because I wanted to make sure that the bottom sigil kind of represents the youngest all the way to the oldest. And then inside of these drawings, the symbols represent the career that each of these family members are participating in, that will contribute to the society. And this is where I put the materials. You can actually create variation of materials just using these kinds of drawings. So this is very complicated in the beginning, but you'll understand it. But the idea is so that when you have these assets ready, you'll be able to show three elements of storytelling that are very important to you as an artist. Because in the end of the day, what's important to us is aesthetics, right? And the reason for creating the environment in the first place. So what are the important storytelling elements? So those are props. Props are there to show the height and the scale, and make sure that when you have the assets inside the building, that you're telling the people, telling the world that someone is living there. I think the very first mistake that new artists create is that everything is just way too clean, right? So that's why I kind of wanted to break it down into these small like drawings, just so that I know what I'll be able to put inside. Not just have these clean, non-wear and tear buildings that look like it was just newly furnished. I wanted it to feel that there is somebody who made this. There's an intelligent design. And of course, don't forget the symbols. These are very important because they show culture and belief. So the story behind this actually is the transition of we call this one, the Vikings towards Christianity. When the Vikings didn't want to become violent anymore, because they, the concept of charity and then helping out other people through Christianity kind of made them a lot more, how do you say, defensive. So that's the reason why there are no swords here and mainly shields. So if you can see here, these symbols are actually shields. So that's something that that is very important to me. And you might have your own way of expressing your own symbols and the icons to show the belief of that place. That's why I added the cruciform and the banners, because that's how I wanted to portray the environment. And then, of course, the icons. These are supposed to show historical context. So an icon differs from a symbol simply by familiarity. All right. So symbol is mainly about what the culture believes, right? So the Yggdrasil for those people who watch Loki, the Yggdrasil is supposed to represent the tree of life in the Viking era, right? That's their symbol, but their icon for as a culture is the boats, and every culture knows what a boat looks like. So that is the icon. So keep that in mind, because this is one way that you can communicate to the audience that this is important. Watch it, check it out. So yeah, that's storytelling. The next, now we can do the nitty gritty stuff. This is where I'm going to be showing to you the pipeline that is generally present in the 3D environment. All right, so we're just going to tackle 7. There are more, but these are the general breakdown of how the pipeline operates. So you have number 1, the design brief. This is just simply about how do you say? This is what you get from the client or for yourself. You can actually create your own design brief. Design brief are usually just paragraphs of the stuff that your clients wants to see, right? So this is where the fun this is where the like the blue sky stage comes in. You don't really have a commitment to how the design will look like, but you have an idea of what you want to see, right? So that's where the design brief comes in. And then you have the second, which is the reference collection. Now, this is very important, because like everyone can have a different view of a certain specific object by just saying it, right? So if you say a dog, right? I probably am thinking of a Shih Tzu, but you're probably thinking of a French Bulldog. So that's a difference between having a design brief versus a reference collection. Reference collection is where you want to get really concrete about the things you want to see, right? And that we're on the same page. And usually, sadly, this is being skipped, right? Or the design brief is being skipped, so you don't know if you guys are on the same page. And then the third step is the concept art. This is where the drawings come in. This is more of like solidifying how you want the place to look like or the thing to look like very specifically, right? So they do this a lot in League of Legends, where they're going to get the design of a Birdman, let's say, and then they will have 5 versions of that Birdman, and then they will agree on one. And then when they agree on one, they will expand that further, have different versions of that until finally they arrive at the concept that they all agree with, which will turn into a blackout. So the blackout, this is very like broad, but the blackout just generally means that it is the basic primitive shapes of everything that you want based on the concept art. All right. So when you have these 3, now you can do the actual creating of the model, which is the 4th. So this is where we do the blackouts in Blender. All of these things are spawned from the 5 basic shapes, which are the torus, the square or the cube, the pyramid, the sphere, and the, what's that? Did I say cylinder? Oh yeah. Basta yun. But that's the blackout. You what you want to do is you want to put everything in proper scale and size. That's where the blackout comes in. And then when you have that done, you move on to modeling, sculpting, and then UV editing. These are very technical, and there are different careers for it. But you can do all these 3 things just so that you can create a really, really convincing environment. Modeling is just box modeling. You can use Maya for that as well in Blender. Sculpting, this is where you make stuff by hand, right? Like you use a pen and a tablet to draw, but in 3D, which is cool. ZBrush is used for that. And then you have UV editing. This is where you're going to be creating a space for the textures to look realistic. All right. And then you have the material authoring, where you're going to create the materials, the textures, because a material is a combination of the textures, which are these: the base color, the roughness, normals, and then the other details, right? So that's what materials are. And then you have the lighting, which are, of course, you guessed it, lighting and presentation. All right. So how did I begin this? A little bit of a story about the environment that I had. Um, it's best to really start with the 5 W's and one H. So that's who, what, when, where, why, and then how. So with mine, I wanted it to become related to the Viking era because I was freshly coming from real world scale, real world buildings, so skyscrapers and stuff like that. But I wanted to do something more of my own liking, which are related to the ancient Vikings and history, and I love that. So I decided to go for Vikings. And then, what is this environment about? And it's the era where the Vikings are converting towards Christianity, and I got that inspiration actually from this guy on YouTube. His name is Reformed Mythologist, and he was talking about this particular show right here, Zack Snyder. Um, and he was nerding out about it to the point that like he kind of convinced me to think about lore, the lore behind things, because if people can become such nerds about God of War and Star Wars, right, then why can't we be nerds also about the Christian lore? Because we can do that with mythology, why not with the Christianity, right? So he started introducing stuff like this, the Hellion, which is one of the ways that the Vikings wrote the gospel. They made it sound Viking. If you guys are so curious about that, you can go and watch Reformed Mythology's video on it. And also Twilight of the Gods, pretty good show. Like really, really good animation. So that's it. So when? 900s, because that's the Viking age. God of War is included in that age. So why not? Freshly coming from that game, might as well try, right? So where is it? I didn't want to do anything from I didn't want to do any rocks or trees. So I went for the interior gathering room. Just simply means that this is the place where the kings and the people eat and gather together. And then why? Um, why were they there, right? Why are the items and the objects placed that way? Because I wanted to show the divine liturgy, which are what the early Christians did as a way of service, right? And then how, right? How did they do this? How do I want to portray this even? I wanted to portray this interior as coming from war that headed towards literacy. So have you noticed in the environment, they actually had books instead of swords, right? So I kind of wanted to play on the idea that the pen is sharper than the sword, stuff like that. So you will never find a blade there inside that interior. And of course, the inspirations I have for this are the Hellion, which is this gospel written in Viking, and then God of War, and then Twilight of the Gods. All right, so that's the design brief. And then I did the reference collection. These are very important to me because, like, one thing that I found out that is very useful is that when you're creating art and then you are looking for references, it's still better to start off with a sketch and then look for references. And then if your brain is tired, go and immediately draw those references because you do not want to stuck in that loop of just making references, of gathering references. So here, how it actually began is that I started with this small space right here, right over here, which expanded while I was creating pieces. I wanted more details, so it started becoming bigger and then bigger and bigger, but stick to one theme. So those are the themes that I have are right here on the left side, which are it needs to have a Nordic environment, which is like where the Vikings came from. It needs to have a Viking architecture, Celtic icons and symbols, which include the cruciform. And if you guys are like familiar with the Viking lore, everything related to Ragnarok, which relates to God of War Ragnarok as well.
And then I also love the animation How to Train Your Dragon. So why not just check out some inspirations? And then of course Twilight of the Gods. Here's my tip. Don't just look for inspirations from video games and film. Actually look for the inspirations where the films come from. So that way you won't be relying on the existing art, but you will be looking at the art in general in based in the real world. And they will just add a little bit more realism to the stuff that you're going to be creating. Okay, so that's reference collection. Next, concept art. I was a concept artist before. So this is one of the first sketches that I created. This art actually took a long time to finish. So I wanted to do something a little bit more far away from the original design of buildings, which are the angular, square, rectangular shape of the buildings, and went for the angular design. So I wanted it to be more roundish, like an egg, you know? And then the staircase as well, the throne area, the yeah, all these places. And then I wanted to have more organic visuals, which included the visual language of the tree and the mountains. And then I wanted to have a lot of ornaments. And I overdid this. So I still have a lot of assets that I've made related to ornaments, but that didn't make it to the scene because it was too much. And then I wanted to make sure that it had clear silhouette. So from afar, if it looks good, then it's good. And if you ask another person, make sure that they're not an artist. If it's good, then it's good. And the reason why you should never ask another artist for a critique in the first place, you can do that later. But in the beginning, it's best if it's not an artist because they're going to be very honest if they like it or if they don't. So that's a tip for you. And then if you're going to create the concept art, I'm not really a painter, so I went with a whole black and white value, sometimes 3-layer painting, but that's not really the best. So just go for something as simple as black and white with clear silhouettes, and up to you on how you want the visual language to be, right? Well, at least that's me because I came from concept art. But if you're a 3D artist, just ask other artists to draw. Maybe they can help you. So that's the concept art phase. Then the next phase is the blackout in Blender. So this is where I did the primitive shapes, as you can see. I was trying to make this level where it's more vertical. So you have the 3 spaces, which is the ceiling area, and then the throne area, and then the main hall. And then one tip, always have a folder per category, which means that if you have a like 5 versions of a pillar, please have a folder per pillar because you do not want to lose your files. You don't want to get scrambled. And that's like number one thing that I wish I learned when I was beginning is that you have to keep a very healthy file organization for your PC. So that way you won't have any problems in the future. And then of course, color code. And like what I did here is that I did the random colors in Blender because you can actually have different colors per piece, which is awesome. Just to so that you'll avoid confusion. Because the idea is to that so that you can create the models in Blender and then finalize it in Unreal Engine 5. So the main workflow that I have, and I will demonstrate this later, is that you start creating stuff in Blender, import them in UE5, so that when you make changes in Blender, you won't have to make any changes at all in Unreal Engine 5. All right. So that's another tip that I will give you is that always choose one software to create the material, to create the assets, and then just use Unreal Engine for the presentation. But you can use Unreal Engine for the modeling. I just didn't find that useful for myself. But if you have done it, then congrats to you. That's the blackout. Then next is the modeling, sculpting, and UV editing. This is where your decisions will come in. This is actually the longest process because like you have this whole idea in your brain, but to execute it, that's another story. So you have a detailed choice. You have a detailed choice between detailed sculpting or modeling or baking, and you're kind of interchanging between the two of them, but between the three of them. But the general rule is everything that I have with detail is done with sculpting. So this one is sculpting as well. If you guys are curious, I use this thing called displacement, so that way I wouldn't have to draw every single piece, because that's a pain. You don't want to do that, but that's where the sculpting comes in. Then you have the modeling, which are the shapes, the general shapes. So everything here is actually modeling, including these small like symbols right here. And then, yeah, detail is done through controlled manipulation of polygons. That's where the modeling comes in. And then the baking is the middle ground between sculpting and modeling. This is where you get the details in sculpting, and then you bake it to the model version that is lower polygon, so you can get the details from the sculpt. That's that. And then you have the material authoring. Now, there are different types of material authoring, and if you're new with 3D art, I'm sure that you guys are familiar with UVs, right? UVs are just they're fun, they're great. You one tile UV, awesome. But the hard part about that is you can't really like reuse it over and over again. So in environment art, you have these things called the seamless and tiling textures. So that as you can see here in the lower right corner, these are all repeating objects that can be spread out throughout the whole thing. So this scene right here, this whole building pieces right here, they're only using like one, two, and then three materials with different variations inside of them, because you want to make sure that all of them are consistent with the design, right? So you go with the seamless and then the tiling, because the idea is you do not want to show the world that you're using the same objects over the same materials over and over again. So this is where you have to be more intentional with your modularity design. And then you have to create versions of that, which would include the like a series of damages from clean. So as you can see here, you have the clean one right here on the left. And then you have the scratched here on the right, on the second one, the second wood. Third is more of like it's so scraped that you can't find the lines anymore. And then this one is like kind of like it became flat now and dry to the point that it's growing moss, you know. So you have to be kind of intentional with how you're creating a series of damage so that you can create a variation with all of them. So that's the for the material damages. And then you have the materials. Now in video game environments, I'm sure that everybody's like familiar with the concept of what do you say this one? Base color, roughness, metalness, and normals. And then you have several other versions of those textures that you make together into one material. In video games, we only use three. This is where the base color, the normals, and then the ORM or RMA come in. These are just short forms of the what do you call this one? This is the opacity or occlusion with roughness and metallic. And then you have the other version of that, which is the roughness R, M for metallic, and then A for alpha. And the reason for that is so that we will, instead of having like 4 to 5 textures per piece, we only have 3. So it will save you loads of space. And they have been doing that in video games for quite a long time, which is awesome. Okay. And then the last but not least is that we're going to be talking about the lighting and presentation. So these are just a few tips when you're creating game workflow for Unreal 5. You have to take advantage of the volumetrics. Volumetrics sounds very advanced, but volumetrics just means that this is just the pieces that are floating boxes of volume where you can change the lighting, you can add fog and shadow, so really take advantage of that. And the reason for that is you do not want to rely on the system to do everything for you. You still want to take like you still want to have the choice in the artistic choice within yourself to create the environment, right? So take advantage of the volumetrics, and this includes everything from lighting, right, exposure, and Unreal Engine is really good at doing that. So Lumen is great. I love Lumen, but don't use that as a crutch, because so many new artists use that as a crutch and it's not really serving you well. You have to still be kind of diligent with how you're going to light the scene, right? The next thing that I found out that I did and I found out was really useful is to exaggerate your light positions. What this means is that you do not have to make every single light appear out of out of a window or out of a light source. You can actually place lights around to make it feel believable, even if there's no light source there. Because our goal as 3D environment artists is to immerse the person. And then, so you'll know the person is kind of new to environment art if the environment is screaming at you and it's telling you to look at me, look at me. And that's not the goal of environment art. In fact, what Hugh Trombley told me that's very useful is that if the environment is noticeable, then you are not doing it right. So, and the only time that you'll know that you're doing it right is if the person has played the game and by the end of it, he's like, it's such a nice environment, because he didn't notice it. He was just so immersed in it. And that's the goal of an environment artist. You want that to happen. You do not want to grab the attention of the viewer too much, right? But of course, if they appreciate it and if they're artists, sure, go for it. But in a general, that's just a general sense. Okay. And then the next thing that is very important is you have to prioritize materials over lighting. And this is something that I can't stress enough. When you're having materials, you don't want the light to do all the work for you. Because at the end of the day, when you have a game and people are walking around it, people will realize if it's a bad material, if it's a bad texture, especially if you're using presets from Substance Painter. I've done that a lot and I've been criticized for that a lot. So I had to learn from it. So make sure that your materials look good, even if there's no lighting. All right. And back again, do not use Lumen as a crutch. Lumen is the new lighting system in Unreal that is really, really good at capturing bounce light. So if you guys want to make things look realistic, like let's say an architectural environment that is like of a skyscraper that is 30 story tall, you kind of have to just be careful with like how you're gonna light that whole scene, right? Is it gonna crash your computer? Still use it as a crutch. Just make sure that you still have these volumetrics, light positions, good material, and then have Lumen as kind of like an icing on the cake, you know. And then of course, last but not least, do not use HDRI as a crutch. And HDRI, from what I remember, it means high definition something image. And those are the background images that you can find that is surrounding the scene. And the reason for that is I will actually show you in the demo that is not cool. Not cool to rely too much on HDRI because you'll just be you know you'll be relying too much on what other people created and not what you created yourself. All right. So that's it for that part. So here's the typical things that I would suggest as well. If you're new, right? There's at least these are what I use. Is that for personal work, I would prefer Blender because it's free. Many people are saying that Maya is the standard, and I would totally agree. And I would also argue that Blender is also standard because they're both being used now simultaneously in the industry. But the only reason why I would prefer to start with Blender is because it's free. There's so much support, and there are so many tutorials that you can find on the internet. So if you guys are starting out with 3D, just please learn Blender to your heart's content and make sure that you're modeling the stuff that you're interested in. Otherwise, you might get a career and they will give you the stuff that you don't really like or care about. So do stuff that you like, but I would prefer to start with Blender. The next is Substance Painter. This is not free. This is actually kind of pricey, but the great thing about Substance Painter is that it's available on Steam. It's a little pricey right now. It's around 5,600 pesos, 5,600 pesos. It's too much, in my opinion. But it would be great if you have one, because this is like what we generally use for everything, and we rely on Substance Painter because of its baking system, and it's really good at calculating light source and stuff like that. And of course, Unreal Engine 5, don't forget, this Unreal Engine 5 game. So you have to have Unreal Engine 5. Now, if you guys are like bougie, you have extra cash, and you want to really stick your nose into software, These are other software that I would also suggest, and I use them at work as well. Right when generally when you're working in another company, they will give you the license, so take advantage of that. And I would prefer to start with ZBrush because ZBrush is just really good at handling detail, and you'll find this available in every single AAA company that you're gonna work in, because of the it's just really really good having handling really dense detailed photo scans. And now we're using photographs to make 3D models. Can you imagine that? That's insane. So yeah, that's where ZBrush come in. Then you have Maya. Maya is also really really good. It's being used right now. It's I would say that Maya is like the all right, how would I say this? Blender is the Swiss Army knife, and then you have Maya, which is the chef's knife. So if you want to be really specific on the like animation and modeling and how the measurements, Maya is really really good at that. It's very precise. And then of course Marmoset Toolbag. Marmoset Toolbag is what is being used in majority of portfolios. That includes characters, props, and sometimes clothes. It's great for environment, but it's not necessary for environment because we have a very different method, and I will show you why. But it's great to have an understanding of Marmoset Toolbag. All right, that's pretty much it. So now I'm going to be sharing the demo. So I'm going to try to explain this as quick as I can because there's a lot to take in. But can you see my screen? Can yeah.
Yeah, we can see it right now.
All right, perfect. Good. Okay. So this is the environment that I've created. And I'm going to do a quick breakdown for this. So it's playable, which is cool. So I follow the God of War angle. Love that game. If it's not obvious enough. So this is the environment that I created for it. And you can see the breakdown, right? So as you can see here, the carpets are where I placed all the lore in. This is where the whole concept art started really is because of these carpets right here. So as you walk through, you have the whole family line over here, which will sort of introduce you to these new books that they've collected. Mind you, actually wanted to be so immersed in this. These are actual scripture you can find in Hebrew, which is awesome. So if you guys are like so into detail, you can definitely do that. That's the stuff I did for this. And then I wanted to add the family sigil as well here as you go up because I wanted to remind the player that like when you walk around, you're still in a family household. But this is not a family of 12. This is like a family of families. So these are tribes, right? So I wanted to make sure that like you have the 12 seats here. This is where the biggest brother sits. And then you have the other 12 brothers, or 11 brothers here, or tribes leaders, whatever floats your boat. And then of course I wanted to add the whole religious aspect. So when they come up here, this is where the cruciform comes in. I in the beginning I wanted it to have some sort of like a Zeus model that is from bottom to up, but it turns out that like it would kind of defeat the purpose of my story, so I replace it with a crucifix, which will reintroduce all these families throughout the whole house through these banners right here. So you can see those are the banners right there, which also is beside the shield that they represent. So this is where I want to, like, when you walk in, it's like, oh, what's that? What's this family right here? What do they do? And that's the basic story behind all of these. And of course, the others are like flair. They're kind of like a design choice. So you have it's lagging a bit. These are all the sigils and symbols, the detail right there. And I don't know if I should be showing this, but like here's also the reason why you shouldn't be relying too much on the HDR is because when you get out into the scene, there's a car. Hi. So,
Yeah.
just to be just to be careful. You kind of have to be careful about your whole artistic choice. In this case, the HDR serves me well because of the like you know, the trees and stuff. If you guys are curious about where I got the HDR, this is from Polyhaven. Okay, so now I'm going to break down the actual scene, how I did the environment. So this is where it all began. Yay. These are a lot of pieces. Oh wait, actually not this one. This one. There you go. These are all the beams and we call these, yeah, the materials and stuff like that. This is where all the testing comes in. Because the general rule when you're creating environments is that you have these grids, and these grids will tell you if they are snapping very well together. And the reason for that is you do not want the materials to feel like they're separate or apart from each other. So we have these things called snapping in the environment, where if you're going to move it around, they can blend in very well. Or at least, yeah, they're blending in very, very well. So now, when I'm going to put them all together as a Lego piece, you can see, then you try to, we try to like replicate it from left side to the right. You can see now, look at that. You have no idea where the cuts are in. You can feel it, but the idea is when you're creating an environment like this, you want to make sure that the person doesn't feel the difference, right? Right, like that. There you go. Now this looks like the environment that we want. So now we go back to the scene. You don't realize that these are just like three pieces that are attached together. So this is the first piece, second piece, and the third piece. And then you have the fourth, which is the platform, and this is a separate piece altogether. But the idea is using modules right there. Now, if you want to begin, it's good to always start with a small square, small rectangle, even, and then just like add the details afterwards. But if you can see it, all these grids are aligned to the grid, except for this beam right here. It's aligned in the middle. But that's the goal. Because like if you look at the beam, especially when you're going to combine it, it looks like it's snapping together like one of those Japanese beams that you can find in the ancient buildings and stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons why I changed the snapping to the middle. So now, if you're going to model, here's the basic rule. Usually use a cube. What I prefer, now if you guys are new to Blender, middle mouse to move around, scroll, right? And then shift and then middle mouse again so that you can pan around. Then the period key to focus. Now, when you're modeling, usually just looks like this. Sometimes there's no random color, so it's just a material. What you want is you want the whole object to snap into an edge. And in this case, this is the edge that I want to snap. And I want the controller to be right here. And you will find that in every single scene that you create, because what you want to do is you want to use this controller to like, let's say this one. You want this to snap so that when you're adding the material, you don't even see the seam, because it's all reliant on this grid right here, and they're all inside there. So let's say you're creating a box with a different layer system or the different material as well, or similar material. Make sure that the pivot point is right here in the lower left corner, because that's how the snapping is created, and it's going to make it look just so seamlessly very nice. So then we're going to move it here. So when you add the material now, right, then you want to add the wood. Right, we'll go back to the material mode. It looks like there's no seam. So now you can add the stuff that you want. So wood A and then wood A as well. So there you go. The seams are barely noticeable. So that's kind of like the goal behind the seamless textures that you have. Now you want to make sure that like everything is snappy. So when you look at it from afar, hey, look at that. It's not noticeable. And then now when you import it to Unreal Engine, it looks even better, because like now you can add these variations called the RGB masking. So this is where I'm going to be introducing you to the RGB masking and vertex painting. So I'll show you first vertex painting. Now, if you want to, yep, we're going to go to the workspace. So vertex painting is simply, all right, I'm going to teach, I think, how to use Unreal first. So in Unreal, we have these things called the content drawer, control spacebar. If you want to see where the materials and the objects are viewable, you can find it here. Gerald is playing Elden Ring. Uh, you can see it here. And then you will have these content folders where you can have the different materials and then the objects that you want. So in order to keep it organized, we will have these three essential folders right here, and you can create them by pressing right click. Then you can add a new folder. You can add a material, then a static meshes, which is where your pieces are going to be. Then the textures, where the materials are going to, or where these are going to be added to the materials, which are these. So back to the complicated thing I am talking about when it comes to the what do you call that? Vertex painting. Vertex painting just simply means you have different materials that are plugged into this one single mesh that you can paint over on top manually. So one of the ways that I would do it is by going to this thing called the mesh paint. Now you have these axes right here. Then we're going to be activating the material. So general rule, if we go back to the actual presentation, I think I should just go back to that. Right over, where are we? Right. Is this the one? I think this is the best one. So as you can see, there is the moss. Well, for actually here in the rock, there's actually a moss and then a broken rock version texture, kind of like set up like this. There are three different types of textures that can be variations of each other. And then when you access the vertex painting, let's say this is the red channel, and this red channel will have the main rock texture. Now you can have the broken rock version of that, which will in turn have the green one, where the moss will sit in. And this is where the whole idea of like having variation with multiple pieces very will come in handy so well, so much. Because now we're going back to the actual scene. And I was able to do that here with the rocks here. So now all of them have these different feelings now. They're all the same material, they're all the same the buildings. I don't know what do you call it, pieces, but they feel very different because of how the textures are made. And then I also did the same thing with the wood, and where you can paint the different textures of the wood. So you can have the basic material of this wood right here. And then if you go to mesh paint, then you paint this. Now we will try to just break it apart by adding the broken. Oh, looks like I don't have a texture for that there. Ah, there you go. So they have the broken, dilapidated wood. Now you can see that right there. It's breaking apart. So now it's like tearing itself. And then you can have the restored version. And then you can transition from each other. They can change based on how you want. So that's just the basic idea behind the vertex painting. And then how it's going to look like. This is a little bit complicated, so just bear with me. Is that there's this material called the vertex painting material. It looks really complicated, but but the idea behind it is that you're supposed to have this main material set up right here as your first material, which is this one, this rock right here. Then the red is supposed to be this channel. What do you call this one? This is supposed to be the moss. And I think I only have two channels for the rocks, but for this one, I think I have three. So you have the broken wood, then you have the standard wood, the broken wood, then the wet wood. And then I don't know what this one is. Maybe I added moss, maybe. But you don't really have to use all of this. But the general rule, you just want to make sure that you have plugged in the textures properly, which include the albedo. Generally, we call this base color. Then you have the ORM, which is the opacity, roughness, and then metallic. Then you have the normal for the details that are like this. These are the details. And I think we can change the view. Yep, that's the normal view. The normal view is kind of simulating detail without your mesh being like that. They're all actually really flat meshes, but the textures kind of help with the detail. So if you add the detail now, right, there you go. You're kind of tricking the computer to thinking that like this is supposed to be bumpy, stuff like that. Well, it's not really a trick. It's just how the video games work in general. So that's vertex painting. That's where you paint each individual pieces. And then you have these other things called the RGB masks. So the presentation I have in the presentation, the where is it? We need to look for it right over. There you go. So this one is the second version of masking or adding variation to the modular pieces using RGB masks. So in video games or in any rasterized images in general, you have these things called the red, green, and blue channels in every single piece. And then there are these clever people at Epic Games. Awesome, great for them, and really learned a lot from them. Is that you can create these things called the multi-layer, where you can have different variations of variations similar to the vertex paint with the red, green, and blue. But this time you have switches, which are programs right over here. These are quite complicated, so I won't really break them down. But the general idea is that when you have these RGB masks, all you need to do is to create these things called the right here, like a texture with all these different colors in them. And then you're going to be telling Unreal on where each material is going to be placed based on that color. So I'm going to be showing you all the props that I have right over here. So these are all interconnected with each other. It looks insane, looks a lot, but I'm actually only using 5 materials. And how does that work? So you have the master material, which is going to tell all these softwares and all these materials how they're going to be responding to each other. So I'm going to show the wooden throne. Now these are the switches, right? So now you have the base layer, the red, the green, and then the blue, which are going to have their own different materials. And because they're all related to each other, whenever I'm going to change one, the other materials will get affected. But for some reason, this is not the material we're looking for. So we have to look for the other material. So I'm sure it's not the shelf. This is the wood throne. This is the unique cross table. Let's try this. Change the color. I think it's this one. Oh, wait. Apologize. I need to look for that thing. Maybe it's not the props. Maybe, we'll use this one instead. We'll try with the banners because the concept should be the same. When you're going to change the color of one thing, it should affect everything else. So if I'm going to do the switches here, check this out. It's really cool. Because they're all using the same materials, you should be able to have the changes done as on the spot. That's the idea behind that. And I'm sure we did that. I did that with the shields as well. So all of them use the same texture for wood, for the of the wood. Then you can just change the main shield RGB mask, change the color. There you go. So now you're just adding variations by telling the computer that this version should have this color, but they're all using the same materials. So that's the basic idea behind the RGB masking and the vertex paint. Now, if you guys are really curious about how these things work, there's a tutorial on Gnomon about them called the what do you call that one? Like the shader, like Unreal Engine 5 shaders specifically. So if you guys are curious about how each of these work, I would highly recommend understanding a bit of blueprint, which are related to these programming languages inside. But the great thing about these is I'm not really a coder, so I don't really understand how the code works behind these modules. But the amazing thing with Unreal is that they've made it into these small nuggets of like single use nodes that can be plugged into each other that will make these objects react the way that you want them based on the material. So that's basically it. I think that's basically it for the material stuff. So yeah, I hope that that was useful to you. If you guys have any questions, like go ahead and ask me later because we're gonna have a Q&A. I have no idea what I did with the scene now. I think it's damaged because I touched some stuff, but I will restore it again. But that's the general rule behind this. So yeah, maybe we'll just have to undo a lot of stuff. But anyway, that's the idea behind this. Now I'm going to be sharing my learnings. What have I learned? Now, right here. There you go. So what have I learned? And these are just small tips that I would highly recommend that every single artist just take along with you. This is my personal experience, so take it with a grain of salt. I'm not going to say that these are the things that you should be doing with your life because like you have your own, right? But there are just few things that I would like to share with you is that if you're discouraged and you're trying to create your own environments or at least any artwork in general, is that always remember that iteration kind of takes the longest time. And the reason for that is you will always have a different creative idea on how you want it to initially look like based on how it will look like in the end. All right. So you have to be just aware of the fact that it's never going to look the way that you want. And it's okay, right? And it's okay. No art will always look the same. And if you guys are making a mistake, just put that mistake behind your mind and then try to do the next improvement on your next art. Because if you try to improve your current artwork and you're struggling with it, it's gonna be frustrating and you're never going to find the perfect art. So that's something that I'm going to be sharing with you when it comes to the whole iteration process. And the reason why it takes the longest iteration, and by iteration, I mean when you're making the work and then you look at it from another, like you rest and then you look at it again and you think it's bad and then you want to improve on it. That cycle is normal when it comes to art. But you'll start realizing that there are some things that will not work and you have to be all right with that. So that's why iteration takes the longest. Okay. So next thing is to sandwich your reference collection with your creativity. What I mean by this is you do not want to get too stuck trying to collect references because that would be equivalent to doom scrolling, right? When you're watching TikTok or YouTube shorts the whole night and then you haven't slept. That's similar to what reference collection is. You do not want to just keep collecting references that you will not be using in the future. So you have to sandwich it. And by sandwiching it, I mean start first with the reference collection, like just take around five images that you like, and then you create. So that creates the meat sandwich. This is the bread and then the meat. And then you sandwich it again with another reference collection. And then you do the same thing with creativity. So that way, when you are creating while you're searching for the references, your brain will not be overwhelmed with the information you are trying to collect. You are balancing it out together while you're making and you're collecting references. All right. Oh, and one more thing. Collect references during your break. That's something that I realized. So instead of doom scrolling, this is a great time to just look at things that inspire you. For me, recently, yeah, God of War. As always, I can't stop raving about it. But like if you have a different games that you really love and you like to play, take a time to play it, but don't forget to collect references while you're doing it. So take a screenshot, look across the internet about the design, what makes it so good. So that I would highly recommend that. And then the third creative learning that I would leave with you is that design is contextual, right? And by meaning, so this is where the Pareto principle comes in, where 20% out of, and then 20% is the unfamiliarity of art, and then 80% is the familiarity of art. And every design, good design, has that. So, and why is this very important? Is because you do not want to alienate artists or other people who are looking at your work and think that everything you create is just weird, right? You want to be familiar. So great artists would add something familiar like cowboys, pirates, and then knights, and then add it with a twist, which is unfamiliar. So you can have cowboys versus aliens, right? The old film back in the day. You have the cowboys versus aliens. So the aliens is the 20% unfamiliar, and you're trying to put context into the minds of the person that this is the story that you want to show. So like pirates and monsters, like Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Or knights and symbolisms, like what's that movie? I would say Kingdom of Heaven is also a good idea, a good example of this. So you design is contextual. You kind of have to understand who the people you're talking to, because essentially what design is you're communicating with people. But instead of writing it in letters, you are showing it through the visual language. So yeah, that's the creative learnings that I have. Next, technical learnings. And this is I'm seeing this with my students too. Please keep your files organized, please. I know this because like there are times at work where you're just like piling up with these works and you're doing the unfun stuff, which is organizing your stuff. And then one time you lose this file and now you can't find it. Now you have to do it all over again. So please don't do that. Have a very healthy file organization, meaning if you have to have version 1 to version 20, go for it. Just so that you will not lose the files. So separate the files also per task, right? So you will have one task per file. So that way, in the end of the day, you know that you have done something, you have achieved something, and that none of them are lost. They're all safe. That's something that I would highly please, like, do not ever forget that. And also have multiple versions of files as backup, because you have no idea when the software will crash, how the whole process will be afterwards, and then you have to use another software. So at least stuff like that. There are just so many variables. So just keep a healthy file organization, and then also use what's available online and free. Now I know we have this certain pride with artists where like everything you create has to be original. But the truth is, in life, things are a remix of a remix of a remix of a remix. So do not hesitate to look for things that are online and free, especially if you can take it and the authors are like, hey, this is free, go and try to use it. So use it, take advantage of it. For me, how I was able to learn how to use materials properly was when I started downloading free materials that you can find on, this was back in the day, Megascans, but now Megascans is like bye-bye. Now it's Fab. But now when you have these free stuff, you can actually take it as a learning tool for you. And some concept artists would do the same, right? Like they would take free characters from Daz and then use that as an underlay for their superhero character, so that way they won't have to think about perspective or anatomy. So that's something very valuable to know. And I wish that I wasn't too prideful in my art journey beginning that I would have learned this sooner, right? And also make a material hierarchy unique to you. And what I really mean about this, what I mean by this is that when you're creating materials and you find one on the internet, you don't want to have any problems with copyright. So take what you can, change it, remix it, and now it's yours. All right. So but take advantage of everything that is free. And then of course, the last thing about the technical learning that I wish that I learned when I was younger was to break the software. But what I mean by this is that if you have to go to the point where you don't know how the things function anymore because you've tapped in so many tabs, you've broken it essentially, and you don't know how it works anymore, that's a good thing because you're removing this fear of trying to learn something new. So if you're going to explore something like Unreal Engine or even try to understand the blueprint, right? Try to just break it, and it's fine because I've done that a lot. In fact, I've crashed this software so many times that even I know how it crashes now, and it will crash if I add way too many materials into one beam, and I've done that before. And that's the only time you really know how to use the software is if you know how to break it. Yeah, so check out every feature available. And to make a project while exploring so that you will remember. Okay? Make everything project based. Don't just think about theory. Try to use it. Try to use it as much as you can. So yeah, that's for the technical. And then lastly, where's the wisdom? I will leave this to you. I think this is my last slide right now. So even if you feel that your artwork is now finished, even if it's complete, just finish it. And by finish it, I mean just publish it, right? Because why? Because artists will never ever be satisfied. I know this. I'm one of them. And then one important tip that I will tell you is always transfer what you think was lacking in your current art and bring it to your next art piece, because you will never ever find the perfect method. It's like cooking, right? You'll never find the perfect recipe. It's never going to happen. So might as well just try to do what you can right now, even if it's complete, and then you transfer that skill afterwards to the next magnum opus. But even then, don't stop thinking about that. We're never gonna have a magnum opus. We're just gonna be making the best art that is better from yesterday, right? So finish it, even if you feel it's incomplete, right? And then also separate work from play. What I mean by this is you want to make sure that your computer for work is different from your play. Is because, man, it's so taxing, especially if you have like a 8-hour job and all you do is like model 3D models, and it's taking over your space. You do not want that. And you want to make sure that you're also taking your breaks in between, right? So that's also the reason why you want to separate work from play. We're all artists. We need a break. So please, yes, take a break. And also, last but not least, art is beyond aesthetics. Art is not just about making beautiful things, because you will have your own reasons for making it. And the three people that really inspires me right now when it comes to that are Aaron Blaze, which is the animator for, or well, character artist, I think, for Lion King. He says he creates art so that he'll be able to remember a moment. Um, and that's something that stuck with me. And then with Kim Jung Gi, rest in peace. Um, for him, it's about being in the moment when you're creating art. And then with Arman Serrano, one of our Disney legends, I would call him Disney legends. uh, yeah, shout outs if you guys went to Icon Manila. Really cool. He really stuck into me, where he has his own art for Bible stuff, because that's where he finds purpose. And that's where I found out that when you're creating art, your art should serve a purpose. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my presentation. I would like to leave this here. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. I have another email as well, so if you guys want to check the LinkedIn stuff, I have email there. My socials, this is just where I place my artwork. So if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, DM me and stuff, just go for it. Just say hi. Just don't forget to introduce yourself. um, and name drop some people that we know. And also portfolio, if you guys are curious. All the detailed stuff are here. And if you guys really want to know about how I do the material stuff, don't hesitate to like PM me and stuff. I'm willing to share to you the materials that I have, um, within reason. So yeah. And also special thanks to my mother. She's also a professor at LaSalle, well, former professor. She just retired recently, so she's doing other stuff. And then my brother from he's in Canada. And then of course the chairperson, Sir Patrick. If you're here, hello, sir. Thank you. He was my professor before I became a professor myself. Then Dean Sharon from Benilde as well, and also friends from Narasoft and Buko. Thank you guys for watching. So yeah, now I'm ready for the question and answer portion.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
sir.
you'll have to um Galian, you can take the screen now. Actually, okay.
Yep. I'm done.
And siguro I would like to take the opportunity to ask the first question. Dun sa modeling, of course, yung mga base models that you're gonna use, meron ka bang standard measurement system pagdating sa model to make sure everything is, properly integrated in its proper size?
Okay, yeah. So what I would highly recommend for those people starting I know that there's feet and inches, and we use in the US use what do you call the imperial system? I forgot the term, but I prefer that you use stuff like the metric system, which is inches and meters. And generally, when you're creating art for environment, meters are number one thing because a person is like 2 meters tall. So if you're that tall, now you know how things are measured. So yeah, that's something that I would highly recommend. Just go for the meters. Meters.
Right. Additional question then. Pansin ko kanina during vertex painting, looks pretty cool. Pero do you do this after ma-place mo na lahat ng assets? Mabuo mo na yung buong structure?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
you, okay.
Actually, it depends, sir. There are times when you want to create the materials first because you want to get the feel of the thing. But generally, when you're creating environments, you want to start with a blackout first because a solid blackout will always have the best outcome. So yeah, that's something that I would highly, highly suggest. So yeah.
Okay, let's pass the mic to Jelian now. Jelian, go ahead.
Ayan po. We have question from Halo Hughes. May technique ka ba sa pag-track ng asset revisions at changes?
Oh yeah. Nako. That's very important. At work we use GitHub. Pero if in a general sense, the best thing to do is to have the like a folder that every one of you can view and check. Because what you want is you just want to rely on one folder where all of you are dumping the models into one folder, kumbaga. So if it's just pure chairs, just have a folder that's all about chairs. I hope I'm answering you correctly. Yeah. And then in GitHub, because you have these things called you can pull and push stuff. So it's all in the naming convention. If they all have the same name, you can replace the stuff. So that's the best technique, is to know the name structure and then replace it so that the other person knows what kind of assets they're working on, or if they're working on the same stuff as you. So yun yung general rule that I would think about. Did I answer your question? I hope I answered your question.
It makes sense naman.
Next question from Pixel. Anong technique mo sa pag-layer ng landscape materials nang hindi masyadong resource heavy?
Okay. For landscape materials, madalas you don't really think much about the base layer, right? So if it's just all mud, hindi lang siya pure mud, you will also have to consider yung mga stuff like rocks. So sometimes you'll have just an artist who will just do rocks, So yung mga tall rocks, big rocks, flat rocks, round rocks, and then you'll spread that out with mga foliage. So yun yung very important yun. When you're talking about landscape, ano na yun that's a very different, that's another work in itself So yun lang, that's something that I would at least that's where my mind is heading. I don't know if I answered your question. I hope I did.
Next question po from Bamboo Blueprints. May tips ka ba para sa pag-handle ng atmospheric effects tulad ng fog at volumetric lighting?
Okay. Yung main technique that I would like to use kasi yung there's this metered check mark in volumetrics. So when you have the volumetrics and you're going to just add a check mark there, you can control the exposure. So just take advantage of that. That's the very helpful technique on how much light source you're going to be adding in there. Because sometimes it's either going to be overexposed or underexposed. So at least when you have it in metered, the volume, you know that it's properly sized, properly exposed. Kumbaga, how bright your fire should be, the distance between the windows, how much light they should have, stuff like that. It's very technical. So, yun lang naman.
Next question po from Jonathan Banaynal. Hi, Sir Jer. I really enjoy your
What's up?
work. Do you have any tips for building the storytelling behind your artwork?
Yeah, okay. So if you're going to create concept art, right? Like I'm sure kasi John, one of my best students as well. It's really good. So what I appreciate about what you do with your art kasi is you how do you say this one? You're taking the art literally. So that's the good thing about creating pieces, is that take the symbols literally, right? So if you want to showcase like this place is a mushroom kingdom, like literally have mushroom assets there and draw a lot of those mushrooms. If this is a fire kingdom, fire nation stuff, right? Like Avatar: The Last Airbender, then have a lot of fire, you know, like go wild because you'll know how 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 far you're gonna, you know, have to bring it down, or you're gonna add more story by adding a lot of symbols. So just go wild at it in the beginning, and then you'll find the balance, right? So you know, when you ask for critique, that's when people are gonna tell you, hey, there's too much fire here, or there's too much symbols here. So that's just my first take. Like take things literally when you're making art, because like that's why we're artists, you know. There you go. I hope that answers your question, man. Let's hear it from you again.
From Grace po, does UE recognize the textures applied to Blender objects automatically when it's imported? Is there a preferred file type?
Okay. So there are usually two file types. Yung ginagamit is FBX or OBJ. I have no idea what the difference between the two are. I'm sorry, but the general rule is when you have the mesh assigned to an asset name, a material name, sorry, assigned to a material name, and it has UVs inside, that Unreal Engine will immediately recognize that it does have UVs and it does have a material that is assigned to it. So all you need to do is to just change the material to and rename it to wood, let's say. When you put it to Unreal Engine, it will realize that it's a wood. And then that's when you can add the materials inside. So yeah, so usually FBX is good.
Next question po from unknown. What are your tips for Retopo to make the process more efficient and easier?
Okay. So Retopo in general, there are two ways kasi, right? So you have the high poly to low poly, which is you're going to be adding the material layer on top. And then there's the other technique, which is not really talked about often, is that you have the low poly that you will add textures on top. And the textures will include the sculpting materials and stuff like that. So the optimization is really up to you because in games it depends. You know, you'll hear this a lot with video game designers. It depends, right? So it will all depend on ano yung technique mo. What's your technique? For me personally, my favorite technique is always having a low poly that you will sculpt afterwards, so that way you will have the silhouette properly built and made, and then you can compress the details inside the low poly, kumbaga. So that's just my personal take. The others would disagree. They would say create the high poly first, then retopo, and then bake. So to me, that's just too much work. So it's really up to you, you know, whichever you like.
From Suno, best tool for retopologizing.
Okay, best tool. There's actually Unreal Engine has a retopology tool. You guys have no idea what this is, but you have to check it out. I don't know what it's called, but I think it's parang smart retopo. There's this one artist that was able to do it with UE5, where they just inserted the character and it immediately changed the topology. So yeah, Unreal Engine is actually really good for that. Second, Unreal Engine also has nanite. So it means it will do its own LODs for you, meaning levels of detail. So you don't have to retopologize anything. Just put it in Unreal Engine, activate nanite, and it will give the details for you. And then last, if you want to go old school and you still want to do the whole hand created retopology, right? I would actually stick with Blender. Stick with Blender lang. Kasi Blender has a lot of tools that are add-ons for it. And right now, that's what I really like to use. Pero if if you have the extra cash, you can go for stuff like Smart Retopo 2023, mga ganun. Those are I don't know if they're pricey, pero there are really specific functions there na I think you'll like. But generally for me, I would use Blender. So yun. Yun lang naman.
May gusto akong isingit na tanong. Well, you really started as a children's art illustrator, and I know a lot of talented artists as well doing children's art. Pero whenever I encourage them to try using Unreal, they get intimidated by the yung blueprint.
Yep.
And actually, yung mga nodes, even playing around with the textures, materials, they get intimidated by it. Ikaw, bilang isang children art illustrator, then nag-step forward into the 3D realm, interactive pa, anong may sasuggest mo sa kanila in order for them to overcome this kind of challenging hurdles for them?
No, I have a very simple solution for that. Very simple. Look for this guy on YouTube called named Unreal Sensei. He has a 5 hour tutorial on Unreal Engine. Just take it implement. No, take it in like increments lang, right? Like start with 1 hour and then 1 hour the next day, then an hour after that. Because he will tackle the whole pipeline of Unreal Engine. He's kind of similar to Blender Guru with a donut tutorial. So
yeah.
if you're intimidated and you just want to start with Unreal Sensei. He's really good. So yeah. Or if you're curious, just break stuff. Break stuff in the software. But yeah,
All right.
yun lang.
Julian?
Next question from Blender. Paano mo sinisigurado na natural looking ang transitions between meshes and terrain?
Okay. The natural transitions, I'm guessing you're talking about seamlessness, right? Yung seamless texture. You'll find seamless textures across the internet actually, but the goal kasi is that within the UV space, you want to make sure that it can be replicatable up and down, left and right. So what was the question again? Yeah, I came my mind
Ano ang
shifted
secret
elsewhere.
sa paggawa ng paano mo sinisiguro na natural looking ang transitions between meshes and terrain?
Okay. So when you have everything seamless kasi, you'll know na it will work as well with the other materials if they have the same function na of seamlessness. For example, you have the same coordinate, diba? Texture coordinate for the rock texture. If you have that same coordinate with the seamless snow texture, even if you paint on top of it using vertex paint, they will still have that perfect transition from dry to snowy. Yung ganon. And you'll only be able to find that out by trial and error. For me, kasi I found that out by just using the textile density checker and then yung standard UV coordinator coordinate ng Unreal Engine. Hindi pala Unreal Engine, ng Blender that can be transposed to Unreal Engine. So yun lang naman. That's something to keep in mind. I hope that answers your question.
Next one from Jarvin. How can you keep motivated when creating a big project?
Okay. Motivation, big topic. And Jarvis, what's up, man? He's a senior 3D artist. This guy at Narasoft. So, don't believe na, no, he's he's new. So we're struggling with the same thing because him and I are worked together for a long time. And the number one thing that I would give as a suggestion, not as a rule, is that don't think about how the end will look like. Yeah. Don't think about just don't think about how the end will look like. Think about the current asset that you have right now, finish it, and then worry about it tomorrow. Your future self should worry about the final result. But for me personally is that if you finished one chair today, that's one chair less to finish, or if you finish one table today, that's one less table to finish. So it's really about that. So I don't know if that will help you, but it helped me because I start living in the moment, not thinking about is this going to be the best art piece in the world. You're gonna. So yeah, that's it.
Next question from Suno again. Is there an existing job that focuses solely on texturing assets? Because that is something I'm only confident in.
Okay, yes, that's called material authoring. That's very specific, and the people who do material authoring are versed in substance designer. I don't use that personally, but I would highly suggest that. And also ZBrush would work if you know how to use the what do you call that? But there's a seamless technique to creating textures. Yeah, there's a career for that, and all you need to showcase is the proof that you've used that texture for multiple assets. So I actually have a dedicated artwork. If you look at the what do you call that one? The ancient Roman workshop that I created for ArtStation. There's a dedicated space there just for the materials. So yeah, you can have a career just doing that. Yeah.
May additional question ako about that. Mas advisable ba yung mga artists to collect their own textures by taking photographs and mix and match with other shaders rather than purchasing it directly online or mag-grab dun sa mga freebies? Ano yung recommendations mo for that?
But I would recommend if you are not stuck on a deadline, let's say you don't have a deadline, tapos you can create your own art. I would highly recommend just taking photos and try to recreate them. Kasi that would be your own interpretation of the art. And that's what's going to get you the job usually. So when people are going to ask you for environment art works, that's what they were looking for. If you can recreate real world materials and put them virtually, you're good, you're good. But if you're stuck on a deadline and you just want to meet the client's needs, usually the client will just give you the purchased goods and materials. So it's really that, it's really case by case basis. Kumbaga.
Right.
So, yeah.
Ganyan?
Next question from Tarshir Tactician. Ano ang secret sa paggawa ng realistic water shaders na hindi mabigat sa performance?
Okay. I'm not a I'm not a VFX artist because from what I know, that's a VFX artist work. So I'm not qualified to say. Pero general rule when it comes to water shaders, just have to use the actual water shader. Ano yung tawag dun? Yung water shader of Unreal Engine. They have their own processing for that. So or just go to Fab and take it and put it in. Because I'm really not an expert for water shaders. But I would just say try to experiment with how the volumetrics work. Because most of the time when we're talking about water, it's just how it will look like underneath it. On top, that's just surface ano lang yan. Just use a surface displacement and stuff like that. So I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry, I'm not too qualified for that. But if you are interested, there are VFX artists here that probably can answer your question, but not me. So I apologize.
Pang technical artist siya.
Yeah.
Next question from Baybayin Builder. Paano mo iniiwasan ang art fatigue sa sobrang dami ng assets na kailangan gawin?
Okay, art fatigue. Fatigue is really about knowing when you will stop and end lang naman actually. Because that will happen, it will happen to you. It's inevitable. We're artists. So yung advice ko is to take a break. Because artists, we don't take a break. Alam ko yan. Especially if you're motivated to finishing something. So I would advise using this thing called the Pomodoro. The Pomodoro technique, where dedicate 1 hour just to do the work and then force yourself to stop. Or if you're so unmotivated, give yourself an uninterrupted 1 hour of work and then stop, take a 10 to 30-minute break and then do it again. Because your body, you have to have a breathing. If we breathe nga, right? And then we breathe in, then we breathe out. Or in music, you have a rest and then you have the play, right? Then we should do that with art as well. We should have the create and then the rest. And then the create and then the rest. All you need to do is to find that balance within yourself. For me, what I like to do is in the morning, I will create art, and then in the after, and then I'll take a 1 hour break, then create again by lunch, then have lunch, then create again after lunch, and then have snack, stuff like that. That's mine. You might have your own. So, yeah.
Next po. May specific workflow ka ba para sa cloth or soft body physics sa Unreal Engine?
Okay. For cloth, I would highly suggest Marvelous Designer. Kasi Marvelous Designer is what most fashion designers as well as game creators use. Kasi it's using a parang I don't know kung voxel siya, but it's using real world physics to like cover the body, kumbaga. whatever it is. So it could be table and stuff. So yeah, yun yung highly suggested ko. Marvelous
May,
designer.
may question pala ako dyan sa mga cloth simulation. So if you're working on an environment that it involves a lot of cloth material or cloth assets, possible pa ba maging modular yun?
Yes. Yes.
So how do
The
you
most
select that?
modular, yep. Yung pinaka-modular when it comes to clothing or at least cloth, like what I showed a while ago when it came to the banners, is the masking. Kasi you can have very like distorted crumples of clothes, but you will have a perfect texture when it comes to the masking. So it's really the masking for me, masking the properly. So yun.
Ganun.
Ito po, next question from Suno again. Are you considering part-time work for the SAS Game Art and Design program?
We'll see. We'll see if my schedule permits. Right now, kasi I'm more of on the teaching side. You know, I would like to collaborate on the teaching front. But if I'm gonna have to work, sure, we can discuss. I think I've showed my email, so you know. Well, thank you for considering.
From Soraya naman po. What are the key elements to focus on when building a portfolio for a game art or design career?
Nako. Yeah, that's very good. Akin, stop focusing on the topology. Honestly, right now kasi, topology is kind of free because of the current technology now. We're actually at this stage where we peaked with graphics already back in 2013 because of games like Order 1886, I think, because that's where the photogrammetry started. So don't focus on that. Focus on design, right? Focus on how things will look good. Because we've already peaked in graphics. So yes, go for performance and optimization. Pero go for design first. Design talaga. We're artists first and foremost, okay? So care more about the aesthetics. So if you can make it look good and you can show it to a director and it runs well on your PC, hey, you're doing a good job. So yeah.
May question nga pala ako regarding sa environment. So one of the great game environments that I've ever seen is yung game sa GTA 5.
Mhm.
So actually I was overwhelmed there. I spent a lot of time roaming around the world and not playing any missions kasi I find the environment so immersive and at the same time I enjoy a lot of touring rather than playing. So ano opinion mo sa mga ganong klaseng designs? Do you think malaki yung aspect ng modular design doon sa mga ganong klaseng projects?
Yes. Yes. Nako. Favorite game right now is Red Dead Redemption.
Mhm.
So for me, yung pinaka-important there, very important talaga yung modularity, especially if you're going to be repeating the assets over and over and over again. You want to make sure na hindi recognized yung environment,
Hindi nga
right?
Hindi halata
Right. So I
Mhm.
think they've achieved their job. Yun na yun.
Yeah.
So yun yung aking opinion doon. Like really focus on making things boring. Ito nga yun, very counterintuitive. Actually, for video games and environment art, you have to make it boring para people will not recognize it. And then you can add the Easter eggs, you know. So at least I had a friend from, I don't know, I just say it, Pixel Mafia. That's what they do. Yeah, that's the stuff that he told me, stuff like that. Just make the things look good, as boring as it can be, and then you can add stuff to it na gusto mo. Yung mga ganong klaseng bagay. So yeah. Don't worry too much about the technicality pa. Kasi you will always run into that. There will always be a table of content from the client that will tell you this is how much poly count you should have. This is how the polygons should look like. Yeah, but don't worry about that because they're gonna give that to you in the future naman. So yeah.
Next question from Soraya pa rin po. If you are aiming to be an environmental artist, how many scenes would you suggest including in a portfolio? How much ang salary?
Yeah. Oh, great. Sa akin, it depends on the region and who your art director is. Kasi, so I was hired kind of like in-house because of friends, because of connections. I never really planned on becoming a professional environment artist until a friend of mine told me na, hey, you want to work in a company? Yeah, sure. Sige. So I didn't know that was the job. I would recommend mga five really awesome pieces, right? Create the like I say some make sure that they're not too far away from each other with when in terms of design. Pero you can spread them out in terms of theme. Very important yun. At least that's what the people at the game industry keeps telling me. Na just have something that unique to you. And make sure it's a topic you're interested in. Because you could get hired for for the boring I know for the stuff that you're really good at but you hate as a career, kumbaga. So I'm a 3D environment artist, but some people gave me mga character art. I mean, I will do it because I'm paid for it. Pero I won't say na parang, you know.
Yung
na
puso
ako
mo
yun.
nasa environment.
Yeah.
Kumbaga.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Unahin mo muna yung gusto mo gawin. Love yourself, kumbaga. No.
Last question po natin. From media, what advice can you give to artists in how to continue being inspired to create when encountering a challenge or even facing an artist block?
When it comes to inspiration, hey, Miggy. um, great VFX artist. He's Houdini expert yan.
Mhm.
So yeah, say hi to him. Yeah, when it comes to motivation or inspiration? Motivation ba po? Or ano?
What advice can you give?
Or motivation? Okay. To stay motivated lang, sa akin personally, is don't really look for motivation. Just make art. Kasi the motivation will come after. At least yun. That's kami. Those who have been working at this for a long time. Kasi you won't know how long you've been working on a project until the years have passed. So in terms of motivation, just do the work and then take a lot of rest. Pero yun lang talaga. Kasi ako, I'm not a motivated artist eh. I don't know. I think madami kami sa amin. I won't be the only one to say this. We're more of a just get the work done, and then if it's inspired you, then great. If it doesn't, well, at least you've done something, di ba? So,
Kumbaga, discipline muna.
yeah, that's the term.
All right.
Discipline.
That's all the questions.
All right. Let me share my screen. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Jeremiah. Gaga. That's an outstanding presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
And special thanks also to the following people. Okay, Dr. Etel Chua, Joyong, and kay Dr. Rafael Cabredo, and kay Dr. Neil Patrick Del Gallego, and of course kay Miss Arawela Lou Delmo.
Maraming salamat rin sa ating mga sponsors, Artmaker Studios, De La Salle University College of Computer Studies, and UPLB Computer Science Society.
Okay, reminder lang, if you have any cool projects that you want to share, open tayo kahit na students ka, independent developers, professionals, or may startup business kayo that you have any cool Unreal projects, please let us know. You can invite you as one of our guest speakers. So just email at community@unreal.ph.
You can also follow us on our social media channels. Lahat po yan Unreal PHL. Also, join na rin po kayo sa online community ng Unreal PHL.
Discord yan. And if you are interested for networking, please go to our Zoom channel. Actually, it's posted now do sa mga social media channel namin. And take note, we are limited to 100 packs. So if you want to get to know our speaker, ask some questions sa mga community members natin, please join us via Zoom.
To everyone watching right now, live man po yan or pre-recorded.
This is Michael Rivera, your host.
And I'm Jillian Carillo, your co-host. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Salamat.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Bye.